Welcome to 1202, the Human Factors Podcast. The podcast that covers all things about humans, technology, and particularly the bit in between.
Welcome to 1202, the Human Factors Podcast. The podcast that covers all things about humans, technology, and particularly the bit in between. With your host, Barry Kirby.
Welcome to the first interview of 2020. It already is almost 2/3 of the way through January already, and Christmas and New Year seems to be so far away. But we are keeping on with our mission to look at how human factors is used in different domains. And one of the domains I've not really done much work in is the civil nuclear domain, which is why I'm incredibly pleased to have a almost ambassador for that domain. And I'll introduce Grant Hudson, who is the head of human factors at Cavendish Nuclear. Welcome, Grant.
Hello, Barry. How's it going?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I've got a slight disclaimer here that Grant is somebody who I've known for quite a long time. And in fact, I've sort of worked out that it's literally 20 years ago this month that I first met you. And in my yeah, it's very crazy, isn't it? So in my first ever civilian job after leaving the army, the first person I met in my new office was your good self.
Indeed.
And now you're the head of human factors at Cavendish Nuclear. So what does the head of human factors at Cavendish Nuclear actually do?
Good question. Do quite a lot. It's I oversee the technical governance of the human factors work. I manage the human factors team. I input to bids. I act as technical expert in certain areas such as human factors integration, which is still to an extent in its infancy in the nuclear industry compared to defence. I liaise with senior management. I do recruitment. Lots of management-y type stuff, basically, but still with the odd finger or toe dipped in the technical pie.
So you still find yourself being able to actually do what I guess we would class as the fun stuff as well as the management then?
Well, it's handy when you're actually working out who's doing the work. Not that I tend to sort of pick and choose the most fun stuff, but that is an option.
That's brilliant. So as we said, we've I guess both been in this game now for quite a while. So how did you actually get into human factors in the first place? How did you decide that you want to get into this field?
Well, I left school and I went into doing a software engineering apprenticeship because I loved computers. Mm-hmm. And that was a 4-year apprenticeship. And in my 4th year, I was working on the en route centre for the UK, which is the Swanwick Air Traffic Control Centre. And I was doing some really exciting coding, which was taking all the different radar feeds from different networks and converting them into a single data packet. As you can tell, that was thrilling. Yeah, and there was a lot of people in the corner. There was a few people in the corner doing, at the time, what was really cool stuff with pictures. Because way back when in like the early 90s, computer graphics were still the realm of games machines and computer games. So I just got chatting to them. I wanted a way out of the software engineering world, and one of them said, well, why don't you go to Loughborough and do a degree in ergonomics? And I said, what the hell's that?
Fair enough.
They gave me the information. I applied, got on the course, and the rest, as they say, is history.
So it was literally you'd never heard of this at sort of school or even what do you do now?
No,
it was that.
It was that. I mean, my school, they'd just about heard of computers and computer programming, because when I left school, I actually was a systems analyst, and then they had no idea what that meant. So yes, and then got into so never heard of ergonomics or human factors, never done anything psychology related or a little bit of human biology and human anatomy when I was at school, but nothing sort of typically ergonomic. Yeah.
So now you've been to Loughborough. You're a fully qualified and raring to go. Where's your career path taken you after that?
Left Loughborough, and then I started off at Smiths Aerospace, which is now GE Aviation, up in Cheltenham, working for Alison Starr, and working on a mixture of European and UK projects, speech recognition, touchscreens, looking at AI, but a lot of the sort of HCI aspects of it. And did that for about four years, and you came along about after year 3, I think it was.
Something like that, and then you started to lead me astray with various trips out, I seem to remember. But,
maybe.
But
yeah, so I started off at Smiths there for 4 years, then moved to Quintech, which is Talos Consulting, not to be confused with at the time Kinetic.
Yes,
worked on HMS Queen Elizabeth, or as was CVF at the time. Worked on Bowman, supported a lot of other smaller projects, but primarily QE and Bowman were the big ones I was working on. Moved on from there to MBDA, where I became a rocket scientist.
you like that, don't you? You really like that.
Because I can honestly say to people, this isn't rocket science. So yes, I was there for a couple of years working on complex weapon systems, looking at the human-machine interfaces for planning, looking at aspects of Type 45's weapon systems, and actually became the, as they termed it, operational architecture lead for a new concept weapon, which was an interesting project because I changed my name to protect the innocent, as it were, and became the operational architecture lead and had nothing to do with human factors. Because the team of graduates... So this was doing HF by stealth.
Right.
The team of engineers I had were kind of not exactly anti-human factors, but saw it as a bit wussy and pointless. And within the first month, I had them thinking basically nothing but operator and maintainer issues. So the HF report that I could dump out of the system every month was incredibly good, and I had done nothing for it.
Well done. Nice, good skills.
Yeah. I left there and I went to work for Serco, which is now part of Jacobs, which is my first foray into the nuclear industry. Did some work for Sellafield and the local power stations of Oldbury and Berkeley near Bristol. Moved on from there to Atkins, where I was the human factors capability lead for defence, and effectively started doing a lot more of the management side of things there. Bid work. We did a lot of anthropometric modelling using Jack on various military vehicles. Also had sort of mixing back into working for AWE and supporting Sellafield in the early days of their security enhancement program. And then from there moved to Cavendish Nuclear, and where I am still today after just 6.5 years.
This must be the longest role you've ever had at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, it shocked me.
Wow. We were very impressed. Stability. I mean, clearly the experience that you've had is quite phenomenally vast. You've worked on a wide range of programs and for a number of different companies. But what's been that most challenging project you've worked on?
Challenging, I think, would have to have been Bowman, because it was such a variety of vehicles to fit the radio systems into, with different issues, so many stakeholders, so many different, what the senior military wanted versus the lower ranks, versus what the requirements might have said, versus what the DPA as was, but DENS as it is now, want to pay for.
So just to jump in, just just for those that are not aware, Bowman is the communications system, or almost like communications backbone now, that is in every vehicle and on every person, pretty much. So what you were doing then is really very fundamental to the way that the military operated then and still operate today.
Indeed, and it was the first time anything like that had been done on the vehicles, and we were having to fight requirements that had been set 20 years beforehand based on a completely different type of vehicle. I think one of the comedy moments of the project, I remember sitting in a review because I was in charge of, well, one of my vehicles I was in charge of was Land Rover, and I had the one of the chief engineers of Jaguar Land Rover in the meeting. And when he found out the G-shock requirement that the equipment had to go through, he fell off the chair laughing with the words, "But the vehicle self-destructs at 6." And it was
nice.
a good 10 times or more of that the radio equipment had to survive. And so we had to pick him up. But it was set for putting into a Challenger tank. They just copied and pasted that requirement. It was
right.
Constantly, it was challenging. It was on the go. It's having to keep your wits about you constantly. The guys from Kinetic were always up for a challenge, up for finding a gap and a hole. So you really did have to be fully on it the whole time.
Yeah. So if that was the most challenging, then what's been the most rewarding, would you say?
Rewarding was a tiny little project that I did when I was at Quintech that was called Mindtech. It was supporting ERA technology, and they developed a landmine detector with a very special human-machine interface. And it was working with them and going out to Bosnia and seeing the guys in the field, in minefields, and seeing how they operated, learning how to actually detect mines and pull them out of the ground yourself, because there were several big training areas where they buried dead mines, and you could sweep for them and then actually learn how to take a mine out of the ground safely. But it was going around the AVO and seeing what the impact of removing the landmines was on people. It was giving people their lives back. School children could go to school again. So some pretty horrific stuff that the Serbs had done with the mines out there, and clearing out. Yes, it was sort of booby upon booby upon booby trap in some areas, just absolutely horrific. But it was giving people their houses back, their schools back, things like that it was contributing to.
Wow, I mean that might also preclude my next question then, which is really, I mean, we in Human Factors obviously get to work with users an awful lot, because that's the bread and butter about what we do. But what's that most interesting user group you've had to interact with, either for a challenging or rewarding, or just what user group do you remember most than anything else?
The actual user group that was the most, I think, interesting, challenging, and to an extent rewarding all in one. Bit of a generalisation, but I would say the British Army. Possibly tapping in the Royal Marines, the guys at 4-2 Commando.
Okay, that's a combo. Why is that?
That was partly because it's having to break the barriers down so they don't see you as a senior officer, because they regard all civilians, kind of, no matter when you're at work, as an officer, and you walk in with that's my dog, sorry, with senior in your job title, and instantly they see you as like a major, and they clam up a bit. But it's getting to break down those barriers, telling them, I appreciate that you're supposed to call me sir, but I haven't been knighted quite yet, so just call me by my name. And I found the easiest way to do that was to make them a brew, and that kind of broke barriers down. But they were always so supportive, keen, helpful, Yeah, and so varied. If you compare, when I say the army, you're working with cavalry one week, a different cavalry division the next, and they're just as bonkers but slightly different. You've got Royal Artillery, you've got Logistics Corps, you've got infantry, different types of infantry. You've got the medical guys, and then you've got the Marines on top, who are a different flavour of crazy, but in a really, really good, helpful, supportive, we want to get this job done way.
Cool. That sounds that. So thank you for that. We'll come back in a minute or so's time when we look up on the nuclear industry as a whole.
Okay, cool.
You are listening to 1202, the Human Factors Podcast. We wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you for your support. You can help further by rating us through your podcast provider, sharing us through social media, and telling your friends and colleagues. Let's work together in raising awareness of the value in putting users at the center of what we do.
Welcome back. So obviously you've had, as we said, you've had a really fascinating career today, but now you're fully embedded in the nuclear industry. So where does human factors have that biggest impact in the nuclear environment?
It's a difficult one. There's areas where it should have a big impact, but a lot of the human factors input in the nuclear industry is based on historical interactions. Traditionally, it's a case of you will support the safety case, and you will come in and you will assess something. Typically in defense or aerospace, you'll get involved at the beginning or early on in the design and influence that. But the nuclear industry is still very heavily into assessment. It's starting to try and get HF a bit involved in design, but you're then up against very well-established disciplines. For example, mechanical process, electrical controls and instrumentation. They've all got their domains, and then some of them are okay with these weird HF people coming in and helping them, and others just see as well, we've not used you before. We did a perfectly good design last time.
So are you then really just coming in and almost checking their homework rather than getting involved as early as you possibly can then?
In a lot of projects, yes. So we'll get a design, or we'll turn up for a HAZOP, that's a hazard and operability study, and we'll assess it, and we'll say this is good from an anthropometric perspective, or you can't reach it, or it's too big, it's too heavy, or you're going to need more people, or we need to develop training. But on some projects, tends to be the ones that the engineering managers, how can I put this, I've possibly had the most influence on, or maybe just threatened enough times around the water cooler, that they come to me first, or my team, because they've seen in one way the damage that human factors can do coming in at the end, picking holes in something that the guys have been working on for years, and then going and then back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
Whereas if they get us involved early, some of the guys realise that if you get us involved early on, there's more of a chance for getting through at the end.
So do they see that as a potential cost saving or an efficiency saving, or just they get you off their back earlier?
I'd say for the ones that are sort of like in one way pro HF, all three of the above.
Right. Okay.
But I don't really care, because it has the result that as an HF practitioner I want, which is to get the design as good as possible from the early stages.
So how do you see this changing over time? Because I mean, I fully agree with what you're saying, because we worked in quite a few domains now where unless it's really heavily mandated, I mean, the defense industry, we've sort of talked on this podcast before about where standards come from and things like that. Mm-hmm. But you've got standards that are 61508 and things like that really are quite woolly when it comes to how the operator gets involved in these things. Do you think there's a standards issue in the nuclear environment?
I think there's a little bit of a standards issue, but one of the issues is that every site license company, so for example, Magnox or EDF or Sellafield or any of the smaller organisations, all have their own guidance, which, yes,
Okay.
is derived from a lot of the standards, but each site is different and will derive their own preferred aspects from those standards. There's no standardization, as it were, across the nuclear industry.
Right. Okay.
Which appears from my interactions with the regulator to almost be encouraged, especially when it comes to aspects as human factors integration, because coming from defence land, there is one process, and that will fit your 10 grand assessment of a generator up to your multi-billion pound purchase of aircraft carriers or military vehicles, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's human factors integration isn't that well understood, it's mandated but not well understood, as it were. Everyone does it differently. So it's a lack of not so much standards, but standardization, I'd say, across the industry.
And I mean, my instinct to that is, oh my goodness, how can we not do that? But I guess, is there an opportunity there as well? Because actually, I guess different sites have different requirements and things like that. Therefore, is it an opportunity for human factors practitioners to actually just implement what is needed rather than having to adhere to an overall process that could be unwieldy?
It could be, but I've always regarded the mods process as it's as unwieldy as you don't want it to be. It's highly tailorable. Yeah. But I think it's because I'm not wishing to tread on too many toes for once in my life. A lot of the human factors practitioners in the nuclear industry come from psychology background rather than an engineering or ergonomics or human factors background, as it were. So they've got different views and different understandings of how to integrate with engineering and design and focus on the error side of things. And that's a good thing in a way, is focusing on human error, because to reduce human error makes things safer. And in the nuclear industry, you don't want something that's unsafe. It's a bad day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So alongside that, then, what do you see the big challenges in the nuclear industry right now? What are the sort of problems you're facing?
Oh, problems we're facing, I think, is overall the nuclear industry is coming to terms with having budgets, which historically it's been a bottomless pit. Now it is constrained. So, for example, Sellafield will get audited by the government auditors, which never used to happen, to see how public money is being spent. So people are clamping down, and unfortunately, because a lot of the weight is in, for example, mechanical, and the managers will come from mechanical, they'll protect what they know, not this new fly-by-night thing called human factors. But I know in some areas, for example, the new build, they are doing a lot of human factors by accident, which is nice to see. There's areas that don't have HF people, but they're doing it. And that's kind of working quite well. Training, for example, is changing. But I think one of the biggest challenges that we still face is the disassociating human factors from the safety case. And getting people to realise that, yes, human factors supports the safety case, doing human reliability and human error, but it massively supports the design and engineering. And if you get in there, it makes it safer and more reliable for when someone comes to assess it at the end for human error. It's making that mindset and just getting them to think a little bit more systematically as opposed to stovepipe by discipline.
Okay, so if you were somebody coming to work to be part of your team, what sort of tools and techniques would they be using on a sort of a regular basis?
Whatever.
Just
No.
the book.
Well, that's what do you always use? You've got the fundamentals of task analysis, but whether that's hierarchical, tabular, whether it's link, all the different analyses techniques, we will use whichever are appropriate for the job. We'll use primarily sort of standards or company, or when I say company, as in site license company guidance for HMI design, but we will use different techniques to sort of work out the allocation of function, whether it's appropriate, what could be improved. So we'll do that. Do quite a bit of manual handling assessment, but it's just using the Mac tool just to make it clear to engineers that 15 kilogram object can't be lifted by someone at arm's length whilst they're lying down, for example.
Yeah. No, I see that.
It's amazing how I think they've been watching too many Marvel movies, some of the mechanical engineers. The things I've come across, not just those at Cavendish, but across the industry. Oh, well, someone can do this. It's like, wow. And no Iron Man suit either. But so yeah, we'll use effectively whatever is around. I mean, I love human factors integration, and I will always indoctrinate anyone in my team into human factors integration, because to me it's not just a process, it's a way of thinking, and that will then help them to identify sort of the most appropriate tools, techniques, and approaches to use for whatever it is we're either designing or assessing. I mean, from an assessment perspective, human error, we use HART, FERP, a little bit of Savannah River, skill rule knowledge, for example, just to assess how difficult activities are or how prone to error they are. That's about it, but yeah.
Cool.
So
cool.
A good portfolio of tools and techniques.
So, and is it the sort of environment where you can, you might go to the to a human factors conference or a safety conference, and somebody pops up with a new idea or a new methodology? Do you have that sort of scope to be able to say, well, actually, I fancy trying that out and seeing where we go, or do you have to stick with well-tried, well-tested techniques?
Predominantly, it is well-tried and well-tested, because the regulator is incredibly cautious and risk-averse, and anything new potentially introduces risk.
Quite, yes, that's true.
For example, it's HART or FERP, maybe a bit of Savannah River or skill rule knowledge, end of. However, EDF used a human error technique called NARA. Okay. And it's only them that is permitted to use it in the UK, with the ONR having done an awful lot of hand-holding and working with them to get them bought into it. So it's not a case of the regulator and other organisations don't accept it. It just takes a lot of effort to push it through sometimes.
Okay, so it's possible but not easy.
Yeah.
Do you think that causes us some issues with? I mean, I guess I'll use an example without actually naming it, but I've been playing around with one technique, a measurement technique, and it was chosen because there's not much other stuff in the field, and it's a well-known technique. But then, if everybody else is having to use the well-known technique, then it's clearly going to get more and more coverage, and it's almost a self-sucking lollipop. And if you're actually using technique, but it might not actually be ideal for what you're using it for, we'll never get out of that hole. So yes. Do you think that? Yeah. So how do you think we get out of that loop, or do you just think actually, from what you've said, if it's just going to be those tried and tested techniques, and if something new comes along, then it's going to take a lot of motivation from somebody to get it worthwhile?
I think it will take a lot of motivation or a significant event to make people look at things differently. That, for example, all the human error was assessed at, let's say, 10 to the minus 4 for these activities, but they keep making a mistake at 1 in 100 times of doing it. But all the analysis is still spot on. What's actually wrong? Well, perhaps the technique isn't correct, because like all quantitative human error methodologies and human reliability methodologies, they're still a little bit wet finger in the air when you delve down into the maths and what they're based on.
That's interesting. I don't have a vast amount of experience of using their techniques, and that there does seem to be a certain element of rolling a dice and then putting 10 times 10 to the negative 4 behind it just to come up with a result. But I'm very much convinced by a lot of people that that's not the case.
No, it's not the case. But I remember going on a human reliability training course when I first got into the industry when I was at Serco. And after it, I said to the trainer, there's a risk here that depending how I'm feeling in the morning when I get up, I can get 2 different results. I went, yes, because whilst it's quantitative, whilst there are tables, a lot of it is down to personal interpretation, trying not to put your own personal view of risk or that'll be all right onto it, and selecting valid but not necessarily the most appropriate, as it were, set of figures. So whilst it's not quite as rolling the dice and x to the minus 10 to the minus 4, there is a lot of it is open to a lot of variance across different HF practitioners and personality types.
But that's where I guess so that's where the whole SQUEP, the suitably qualified and experienced personnel in your experience, really comes into play then.
It helps, but again, if you've got someone that's, let's say, a bit blasé and has come up with a 10 to the minus 4, and the person that's reviewing it is also a little bit blasé and going, yeah, that's about right. But if you've got someone that's very risk averse, inherently, that's been around for 10, 15 years doing it, they might challenge that 10 to the minus 4 and go, no, it should be 10 to the minus 3, which can have a massive impact on the safety case.
Yes, that's very true.
And being a lot of HF practitioners don't tend to work that much together that come on projects. If you've got a safety case, you might have 10 or 15 safety case engineers, but only perhaps one human factors person, and then maybe their boss verifying their numbers, or someone else that they're brought in to verify those numbers.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, there is a lot of times at the moment, particularly I guess with the human factors community actually being quite small, there are a lot of job openings out there at the moment. We're not a massive community in the grand scheme of things. We very thinly spread.
Indeed.
So
with seemingly fewer and fewer people coming online every year.
So I guess that is a bit of a message out to other people, is there's a very lucrative industry out here just to be taken up, if people are looking for that next job move.
Indeed, and I mean that's something I've definitely picked up on from moving from sort of software into human factors. It's, some people call it niche. I just regard it as the typical supply and demand, whereas in case of human factors, demand outstrips supply. So yes.
No, that's very true. So to take a slightly step backwards into all this, did you watch the Chernobyl thing on? It'd be interesting to get, because I don't know about you, but I found that really quite. I wanted to sit back and enjoy it just as a TV series, but I couldn't help dive into all the human behavior elements of it, some of the HCI side of things as well. What was your take on it? What did you think?
Yeah. Well, from an industry perspective, I'd say it was probably about 98, 99% accurate. because there's some stuff that wasn't necessary to show and they didn't show it. But yeah, it struck me that it was human factors in capital letters going up to the Politburo level.
Yes.
It was human error. Oh yeah, but it was human error from government and the culture from government and everything that had pervaded down. The guys operating it, they get a kicking because they weren't trained. They weren't this. They believe they were doing everything they could. Because if they didn't, they got sacked.
Mm.
They did their job as best they could. You didn't speak up because you get sacked. You ruled, you respected authority. Your boss's word was God. The actual human-machine interface is the classic, but the Geiger counter is only reading X rads. Yeah, well, that's what it tops out at.
Yes, I did think that was actually sad but brilliant.
That happened. But yeah, that's the thing. Just because something's top of a scale doesn't mean it's not going beyond it.
Yes.
This podcast is supported by K-Sharp, the Human Science Research and Human Factors Consultancy. If you want to know how innovating in the relationship between humans and technology can add value to your business, product, or research, then visit www.ksharp.co.uk.
As a slightly frivolous wrapping up to the interview to some extent, if you could send a message to 16-year-old Grant, you maybe just completed your hello Betsy, just completed your sort of GCSEs and stuff. What bit of advice would you give yourself?
What bit of advice would I give myself? God. Difficult because the software engineering
from cider.
Stay away. No, I didn't touch that until I was at university. Cider is good. No, my advice would be just keep your eyes open and give everything a go. Because at 16, I was very focused on software. This is what I want to do. And then there's so much more stuff out there. But again, the software and the apprenticeship really help because it allows me to communicate well with engineers. But just, take opportunities. Just go have fun.
Good shout. Is there, I mean, as we've already said, you have worked in quite a wide range of environments and roles, but is there still something out there to challenge you? Is there an environment or a role that still has it out there? I mean, I've been quite open that if Elon Musk comes knocking at my door, I'll be at SpaceX like a shot. I don't care what else I'm doing.
Because I'll be beating you there, because that is the one thing. Yeah, I mean, space, even if not going up there, but just being involved in the whole, the physiological side, the design of interfaces, the cabins, the rocket, the cockpits, everything, that would definitely be it. Although I have to say, deep dark secret, I've always actually just wanted to design a washing machine.
A washing machine?
Yeah.
Why?
A nice and simple washing machine, because I always find them really difficult to use, no matter how simple they are.
It's quite interesting you say that, because I was having a conversation with Amanda, my better half, the other day about our dishwasher and the fact that the buttons don't lay out in a logical order.
Yeah.
And so you have to press the left hand button to switch it on, then go complete to the right hand side of it to select which option you want, to then come back to a middle button to select which variety you want of it, and then to go on to the bit. And I'm like, well, that's just crazy. But anyway, a dishwasher, a washing machine. Well, I'll have to keep my eyes open for that bit for you.
Indeed, thank you.
So, the last question then: what is the 2019 was a year full of different things, but what was the most interesting piece of CPD, continuing professional development thing that you did last year?
Difficult one, that.
Like a good boy, you did do your CPD, didn't you? And submit it on time and everything. Well done.
Well, not quite, because I'm still not a full member, and I know I'm going to get a kicking at the next conference because I still haven't done my paperwork properly. But yeah, yes, I still do try and do some CPD. There was a couple of training courses last year that were quite interesting, looking at sort of the impacts of different management techniques and approaches on sort of teams and how they function. Not so much how you can manage people when you're thinking of putting team together. Because, for example, on some of the on nuclear new build and some of the other facilities where we're having to build new facilities to take the old ones down, team structure and converting people in the nuclear industry. One of the challenges is the operational how to run a nuclear power station mindset is vastly different to the decommissioning how to take one down mindset. Because in some cases, you've got people who've nurtured this piece of equipment for 25 years, and now they have to destroy it.
Fair enough.
And it's like it's like asking them to go and shoot their child. Okay, a bit extreme there, but it's that kind of thing that they just can't do it, because it means so many memories, blood, sweat, and tears kind of thing gone into it, and now we're taking it down. So it was learning. It was that kind of sort of how to manage those teams and how to try and set them up and modify their thinking. That was very interesting.
And you can really see that. I can see how that would be quite hard work for them. Well, Grant, I have to say it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. Even though I've known you for such a long period of time, I've certainly learned an awful lot about your background and motivation and things. So thank you very much. We'll hopefully see you at conference, and when, of course, you'll have all your paperwork to be done to be a member, won't you?
Or I'll just get beaten up. Yes. No, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Barry, and thank you for asking me to take part in the podcast. It's a real honour, and look forward to seeing you in April.
Thank you for listening to 1202, the Human Factors Podcast. Please do get in touch with your thoughts, questions, and comments. You can contact us at www.barrykirby.co.uk and on Twitter at @BAZ_K. See you next time. And remember, it's more than just common sense.
Thank you for listening to 1202, the Human Factors Podcast. Please do get in touch with your thoughts, questions, and comments. You can contact us on social media such as Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook at 1202 Podcast. See you next time. And remember, it's more than just common sense.